We are in Yakov and Shabbos 10b. Well, it's actually the last line of 10b2. So if you turn back one page. So it says again, we're going through the expressions of Rabba bar Machasya, the son of Machasya, who says the name of Rav Chama, the son of Goria, and who says the name of Rav. It's a whole tradition there, a three-way tradition that we have here. Okay, so it says, Leola, really, Alishna Adam Beno Ben Banim. A person should never treat one son differently than his other sons. Okay, if I'm going, we always have the problem of the favorite son. Well, you're not supposed to treat any son differently. Why? Shebishvil Mishkal Shnei Salaim Melat, for on account of two Salaim, two slums weight of fine wool, Shenatan Yakov Yosef, that Yakov gave to Yosef, Yotim Mishar Banav, more than his other sons. That's a coat of many colors, however you want to look at that. Nitkanu bo Echav, his brothers became jealous at him. V'nitgalgel hadavar, and the matter evolved. V'yardu avotenu leMitzrayim, and as a result of that, our forefathers went down to Mitzrayim. Well, they have to go to Mitzrayim because they sold their brother, and then there would be a famine in the land, and so on and so forth. So Rashi, the article explains, Melot is wool from a sheep that was covered from birth. Such wool remains perfectly clean. Yaakov thus gave Yosef a tunic made of this fine wool. The Gemara is exaggerating when it says that the tunic weighed the equivalent of only 2 salaim. A tunic certainly weighs more than that. Alternatively, some suggest that just the fabric around the wrist and not the entire garment was made of this wool. According to the second approach, it seems that each of the brothers had a tunic. Their jealousy was aroused only by the special cuffs on Yosef's tunic. Okay. And then Yaakov's action aroused the jealousy of Joseph's brothers and provoked them to sell him as a slave. This eventually led to the descent of Yaakov's entire family to Egypt, where they would spend many years in servitude. The commentators wonder how the Gemara can point to Yaakov's act as causing the servitude, when in fact it had been divinely decreed in the time of Avraham. One answer given is that had there been no jealousy among Yaakov's sons, perhaps the oppression would have been less severe. That's what they want to argue. So now we continue. V'amar Rava bar Machasya amar Rav Chama bar Goria amar Rav li'olam yechazir Adam v'yeshe be'ir sheyeshivata b'krova. A person should always try to reside in a town whose habitation is recent. Shemitoch sheyeshivata krova, since the habitation is recent, avonatem mu'atin, its sins are lessened. If I have a new town, the odds are the people living in the town have not sinned as much as people who are there for a long time. Okay. Shneimar, how do we know this? Shneimar, it says, Hinena ha'ir hazo karova lanu shama v'hi masar. Lot was running away from Sodom, and Lot said to the Malachim after they said to escape to the mountain, he said, rather let me escape to this city that is close to me. It's a small city. And so the Malachim say, okay, fine, they agree to that. So now he can get to go. He goes to Mitzar. The place that's what the place will ultimately be called, actually. My Krova. Now, what did Lot mean by saying the city was near? If you say that by near, he meant that it was physically near, and thus by small, he meant that it was physically small. Why did the Lord have to say this? But the angels could see it for themselves. I don't need to tell me it's a small town. You can see this a small town. Ella, rather the reason is mitoch sheshivata karova. Rather, Lot meant that since its habitation was near, in other words, recent, its transgressions were small or few. That is, since Zoar was founded more recently than Sodom, it should not stand to be Sodom with, it could not be destroyed with Sodom. Wait a second. Sodom was, just for years wise, Sodom was 52 years in existence, and Zoar was 51 years in existence. Just so you know. Okay, and that's why he uses the word na, 50, and that the Gemara is 51. Yeah.
Wasn't Zoar destroyed as well?
Wasn't Zoar what?
Destroyed as well after a little bit longer.
Was it? No. We don't know of that to be a fact of life.
Oh, okay.
What we do know is that Lot was afraid that it would be destroyed. So what he did was he went to the mountain, to the cave, and the daughters thought, once they would leave, that the place would be destroyed. So that's why they enticed their father to impregnate them, and so, while he was drunk. They didn't say, Dad, you have to impregnate us. But they got him drunk, and that was what happened. So now, the Gemara will explain what I just said. So Amar Rav Avin Mikra, what is the verse that reflects this point that his transgressions were smaller? Dichtiv, it says, it's written, Imalta Nashama. It is written in the verse, I will now flee there to Zoar. Nun Aleph, as I said, the Gematria is Chamshin V'chad Have. The Gematria is 51, the Nun being 50, Aleph being 1. The Torah thereby hints that Zoar was 51 years old at the time, V'shal Sodom Chamishim Ushtayim, and the age of Sodom was 52 years at that time. Thus, that Zoar was founded a year after Sodom. As a result, it had less sins, and since it had less sins, it should not be destroyed with Sodom. Okay. So they explain that a city is not destroyed until its inhabitants have committed a preordained amount of sin. Therefore, it is advisable to live in a recently established city whose measure of sin is relatively far from being filled. Unless you really have a bad group there, I don't know. Meiri points out that ideally one should live among God-fearing people and not among sinners, lest he come to emulate their ways. If, however, one cannot find a town inhabited by righteous people, he should live in a town that was recently founded. Since its residents are not so deeply entrenched in evil, it is easier for them to repent. How is evil defined? Correct. Is whatever the Torah says is evil, whatever the Torah says is good. It's not a matter, it's a very absolute status. It's not a relative status. So while the people in their town might believe that they are relatively moral, and I'll give you an example. The Germans, the Nazis in Germany, the Germans felt that it was morally acceptable to kill Jews, gypsies, and so on and so forth. And even though it would go against the absolute standard of morality to say that murder is incorrect. Okay? So and same thing with homosexuality. Years ago, let's say 50 years ago, to try to be safe about this. 50 years ago, homosexuality was considered by most people as an aberration, a sexual aberration. Today, it is deemed a natural thing, and you should love the one you love, as the songs would go. Okay, so it's again, that's relative morality versus absolute morality, which says no, it's an abomination as far as the act is an abomination as far as Hashem has deemed it. So therefore, it is forbidden. Period. Okay, it's that simple. So that's why when you go into a town, you want to go to a town that has not yet entrenched themselves in their multitude of sins. So you want to go to the younger town. That's what they were saying. Now, of course, this isn't a time that people are immersed in idolatry versus, I think that today, we're not that far. Who knows, maybe we are. Yeah.
So you make a really good comment.
You have to speak up.
They
What?
make really good colonizers or settlers.
Who makes good colonizers?
If you can't find a town that's completely inhabited by righteous people, go to a new town. You have a relatively new as in new founded. So if everyone's going to a new town,
Remember the new. I hear what you're saying. You want to say they were colonized, that we would be good for colonization because we keep going to the new towns. But again, remember what I just said. Sodom was established 52 years ago. Zoar was 51. Right. So I just have to go to a town that if I know that town A is being destroyed, which means that their level of sin has been reached. So if I go to a younger town, even 1 year younger, I don't have to go for a town that's brand new on the prairie. Okay? I don't have to go to Plymouth. Okay. And by the way, when you have let's understand that too. Let's say I have a small town, but I have a bunch of Rishaim in that town. I still have to watch out. I mean, who knows what they're doing? So that's why he's saying should look for the Gemara's point. I should look for a righteous town, because if I look for a righteous town, what's the odds that I'm going to be righteous?
better.
Much better. Right. If I'm surrounded by people who are moral and caring about Hashem, so the odds are I'm going to do that, which is why we say that you should harchik mishachin ra. You should stay away from a bad neighbor, but you should get close to a person who is close to Hashem. That's what you want to do. If you don't do that, and that, by the way, think about it, in this town they used to claim, I don't know if they still claim it, but this town was overly affiliated, religiously affiliated. Most people joined a synagogue or a church, or now we have Muslims here, or a mosque. Most people, unlike normal America, were affiliated. In normal America, most people are not affiliated. Right. So they wanted to say, those people who took this informal survey, I guess, wanted to argue that the reason that most people are overly affiliated here is because of Notre Dame. It's a very Christian, Catholic. Okay, it's still Christian.
No, but it's a big like the.
Right. It's a very Catholic school. People are affiliated. They're so on and so forth. So since you have affiliation on that side, so it's going to make sense that everybody wants to be part of a group. Right. And unlike if you go to a place like New York or Chicago or San Francisco or California, where most people are not affiliated, and most people do what they want, so then the odds are that you also won't be affiliated. The odds are heavy at that point, which is why affiliation goes down as we go to the bigger cities. Okay. So let's continue. So he says, after the angels rescued Lot from Sodom, they urged him to flee the mountain. Like I said, he argued, Zoar is closer. Don't worry about it. Don't be concerned. And he says it won't take me long to get there. Moreover, it's small, and you need not be concerned if it survives the destruction. Okay, he's giving them a little bit of musar. Fine. He says the length of Sodom's existence can be calculated as follows. In other words, how does the Gemara know it was only 52 years old? It's very convenient to say they were 52, and Zoar, because of Nun Aleph, was 51. You could always blame it on oral tradition. We have a midrash like that, therefore it must be true. But the rabbis are not so happy when it comes to that, so they want to give you a mathematical proof. Okay? So he says, the length of Sodom's existence can be calculated as follows. Until the dispersion, all of the world's inhabitants lived in Bavel. They subsequently spread out and built cities elsewhere. Hence, it may be assumed that Sodom, which was a major city located outside of Bavel, was founded soon after the dispersion. In other words, after the door flood. The date of the dispersion is alluded to in the verse. The name of the first son of Aver was Peleg, for in his days the world was dispersed. Peleg shares the same root as Haflagah, dispersion. This verse cannot mean merely that dispersion took place sometime in the middle of Peleg's days, neither at his birth or his death, because that allusion would be too vague. The Torah's purpose in stating this allusion is surely to give a specific date rather than a wide time frame. It must mean that the dispersion occurred either at the beginning of Peleg's days, when he was born, or at the end when he died. We know that the dispersion did not take place when Peleg was born, because the descendants of his younger brother Yaktan were among the people dispersed. The verse must therefore mean that the dispersion occurred when Peleg died. It can also be calculated that Peleg died in the 48th year of Avram's life. This calculation is based upon Genesis, which states the length of the generation between Peleg and Avram. Thus, Avram was in his 48th year at the time of the dispersion, and the founding of Sodom, which occurred sometime soon afterwards, as stated above. Destruction of Sodom took place when Avram was 99 years old. This is evident from the fact that the angels proceeded to destroy Sodom after telling Avram that he would have a son in a year's time. And Avram was 100 years old when Yitzchak was born. Since Sodom was founded when Avram was in his 48th year and destroyed when he was in 99th year, it's evidently endured for 52 years. You understand the mathematics? Pretty cool mathematics. Okay.
Who's Peleg? Why is he important?
Peleg was a person named in the Torah, that in the list of names, and it just says the verse was the name of the first son of Aver was Peleg, for in his days the world was dispersed. So it doesn't really matter who Peleg was except for the name, but they were just giving names as they do, and suddenly they throw something else in. He was in a time when the world was divided. So why are you saying that? Why we have to know about Peleg? So they're saying the illusion is that when he died, that is when the dispersion took place, which is when Avram was 48 years old. That they know just from simple numbers, because everybody has a genealogy at that point. So since he's 48, and when he's given this prophecy, he's 99. So now it's simple mathematics. Okay, so now V'shalvata and his peace is the period when Sodom enjoyed peace. Now, Sodom enjoyed peace for a while. He says it's said in Ezekiel. See, this was the sin of Sodom, your sister. Pride, surfeit of bread, and the undisturbed peace were hers and her daughters. But the hand of the poor and the needy she did not support. So Sodom had become a path not known by even the eagle or the bandits. And so what was that? Esrim v'sheish, that was 26 years. Whoops, something happened. Sorry.
When it was destroyed?
What?
After it was destroyed?
I'm looking here. What was it saying? I missed something here. I didn't miss anything. Okay. So Shabbat. So its peace, the period when Sodom enjoyed peace, was first doing that. As from Sheish, he enjoyed peace for 26 years. That's how long they were in good shape. Sodom. Dichtiv, as it says, Shteim Esrei Shana Avdu Ekela Omer, 12 years they served Kedela Omer, V'sheish Shlosh Esrei Shana Maradu, and then for 13 years they rebelled, Va'arba Asa Shana, and the 14th year they went into a battle. So that would be 12 and 13 is what?
25.
And one more year, that would be 26. That was the 14th year. Fine. So, V'yama Rava, and now we go to the next part. Oh, just in general, he says 5 kings, including the king of Sodom, paid tribute to Kedela Omer, king of Elam, for 12 years. Then the 5 kings rebelled, and for a period of 13 years they resisted the might of Kedela Omer. In the 14th year of the rebellion, Kedela Omer and his allies initiated a war against the 5 kings, both defeated and killed. Thus, for a total of 26 years, Sodom did not know peace. It was a peaceful period. Its peaceful period was the other 26 years of the 52 years existence. Okay, so you have half. 26, and 52.
Right, so when it said in the first years of peace, it was, they didn't know it's right or evil, or something.
Say it again, please.
It says it's also stated in Job, Sodom, Sodom has become a path not known by even the eagle, or in other words, bandits.
Oh, in other words, bandits.
That's the eagle by the same bandits.
thieves.
No, it was peaceful. There are no thieves.
Right.
I said eagles and the bandits. I said
Okay.
not eagles are the bandits.
Right. Okay. So now, Amar Rav bar Machasya, Amar Rav Chama bar Guria, Amar Rav. Another statement he said, Kol ir shigagoteha gavoa mibeit knesset. Any city whose roofs are higher than the synagogue, l'sof chareva, will in the end be destroyed. Now, anybody, when you go to Eretz Israel, God willing, you'll all go to Eretz Israel, even just to visit for a year to learn, maybe to live, whatever the case is going to be. You're going to go to Yerushalayim. You're going to go on a tour. And on that tour, if you go on the right tour, I'll even give in case people listening, Jeff Seidel. Okay? Jeff Seidel, I forget what his group is, if he's still giving tours, but he has a great tour. It's a free tour, but it's a tour that brings you around and says all the politically incorrect things. He pulls you to the Western Wall, otherwise known as the Wailing Wall, otherwise known as the Kotel. And he says, look out as far as you can see. See that wall? Guess what? You're now in occupied territories. Because that's behind the Green Line. Right? That really was given to the Arabs. By the, what's it called? The world of... UN, thank you. It wasn't World UN at that point, but whatever it's called, League of Nations. Yeah. Right. So they gave that was part of it. That was, so he said, that's what they're fighting for. Are you willing to see that? Of course, everybody says no. Okay, fine. Okay. Most people don't realize that the Western Wall is what they want to give. What the Arabs want, and the Jews don't want to give away. Okay, not give back, is give away. Then he brings you to other places. The synagogue of the Ramban. The Ramban lived in 1100s. He died, I think, 1200, whatever it was. And the end of his life, he made it to Eretz Israel. And they built a synagogue in his name. This synagogue lasted until 1948. In 1948, the Jordanians came into and took control of Israel, of what we call Israel. The synagogue was 1 foot taller than the mosque. They destroyed the synagogue. It was not destroyed in the war. It was not destroyed by the Christians who were crusading. No. It was destroyed because it was 1 foot taller than one of the mosques in the area. Okay? I'm just showing you that we think that these laws are crazy. And by the way, the Gemara is not saying you should destroy the house. It's saying it will be destroyed. But here they use it the opposite way. But it's something historically interesting to note that the Jordanians, for no reason other than the synagogue being 1 foot taller, and I think that what we're looking at, it was a spire on top more than the actual building, like the antenna. The antenna was there, knock it down.
They just add a bigger antenna on there?
No, because they obviously wanted to destroy it.
Yeah,
it wasn't a matter of how to get around it.
No, right.
Okay, so now it says it will be destroyed. I'm just giving you that little background. When you go to Israel and when you go on tours, you should understand that there's a lot of history behind the history to these things. It wasn't, you look at it as a ruins. When you go to Israel, by the way, again, in Mr. Shem, you will go to Israel, the odds are you're going to see a lot of ruins. So we always think of ruins as something that happened thousands of years ago. And some of them are very recent. Okay? So it says, Shenemar, as it says, to raise up the temple of our God, to restore its ruins and to provide us with a fence in Yehuda and Yerushalayim. She says, this is from Ezra, the verse implies that by raising the temple they merited the perfection of the fence. The verse's corollary is that the temple, the synagogue, should not be elevated. that should the temple or synagogue not be elevated, no protective fence will be provided, and ruin will follow. Yeah.
Is it elevated in the metaphorical sense?
Yes.
Or literal?
What?
Metaphorical?
Lifted as in, well, it should be, he's saying also higher. He's taking it literally. It should be higher.
Right.
Not lifted as I'm going to lift it up.
No, but also like held in respect and stuff, not just.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely there. But he's also saying that in a physical sense, it should be higher than the other buildings. So, but again, I don't think when we're building synagogues today, I don't think we look at that, because I can tell you that if you go to most synagogues today, well, look at this one. You know, this one isn't higher than all the houses that are higher right here. Everything's higher than us. So, and certainly in the old days before we had the remodel, it's only because we have remodel that we have a second floor, well, of the synagogue part, you know. Yeah, so we're going to ask?
Oh, talking about, what were we talking about? We're talking about raising it up?
Raising it up. And your brother asked, does it mean raising it up on only a metaphorical sense, or does it mean in a physical sense? So I said it means in both. Yes. Should I come back to you?
Yeah,
Okay. So when does he say this? Vani immediately him. This teaching applies to the roofs of the houses of all kishkushe vevrure late laban. But regarding the roofs of forts and towers, there is no problem. For that, you can be higher than the shul. Why? Because, well, I'll explain. Because people don't use the roofs as forts or towers. According to this explanation, our houses whose roofs are sloped and are not used for any purpose has the same status as forts and towers. Thus, our roofs today are not part of the problem. We're going to be living space. Yes?
Was the temple higher or lower than the palace?
Whose palace?
The Bede's palace.
The whose?
Solomon's
palace?
Yeah, the royal palace.
The temple would have been bigger, apparently.
No, is it? I remember.
Taller.
Like stationed on the top of the mountain, right? On
Palace
the
or
the temple.
Oh, so that it's it's going to be taller by force.
Right, I know, but I'm saying I can't remember in the story of when they.
You're asking measurements wise? I don't know.
No, like when they would look out the window, they would look up to people in the
Right.
palace. They would look up to.
So I'm saying if you ask me measurement wise, who was taller? I don't know.
When I stand next to each other, I don't know, but one
Correct,
elevated.
but that was certainly the temple was certainly on a high point.
Right. No.
So you're going to see that more than anything else, and that may be also what we're saying, right? What's the point of putting the synagogue higher or in the center, or putting something in the center?
You always see it.
You always see it, and you always have to go to it, right? It's always in the center of your life. You want to make that the center of your life. You don't want to be peripheral. What happened is, and now I'll be more political, if you will. Okay, the problem that conservative and reform faced was, and the problem that actually the church faced is, I'm talking about the Greek Orthodox, was they moved away. They left the building where it was and moved away from the building. So the building became the peripheral. And when you make the building peripheral, you make religion peripheral. Once you make religion peripheral, so now I no longer have to go. So what happened was, for in the Orthodox world, what happens, we have to be within walking distance because of Shabbos, right? So the shul remains the center of our town. We live around concentric circles around the shul. Most people will not live 5 miles from the shul. It's not a smart thing to do unless you're just a wonderfully avid walker who wants to get it and going and is going to impress his children to do that. Or what happened was, again, the shul was in your area, you moved there, and now you just don't want to move out. Fine, that's something else. But in normal terms, a person coming into our community right now is going to say either, where is the Torah Center based, where is HSC based, and get a house around that. So they can either go to both of us, or they can go to one of us. Okay, and again, we'll only do it on Shabbos. Otherwise, I can drive anytime I want. Who cares? But by the way, even with driving, why should I have to drive 30 minutes versus 2 seconds? Right. I get in the car, I drive down the street, and I get it. Or I can walk. I can always walk. That's the point. So that's why the Orthodox community is always stronger religiously, more connected than the non-Orthodox, because we make that the center. So now, and same thing for the church. When they make the church the center, you're going to have a very religious area, and they're going to be very connected. Once they start going to suburbia, well, then the church also becomes like the conservative or Reform synagogues, where they become peripheral. Okay, now they don't have a problem with driving on Shabbos either, the church, but they still, it works to that. What I'm saying, the illustration works. So what Hashem is saying, and what the rabbis is saying is, make it the center, make it the tallest. Every time you look out, you should see that. Nothing should be taller than that. Nothing should be more grandiose. It says that when we're building the shul should you should put all of your beauty into the shul, rather than your homes. Because again, that is Zeh Kelim Aveu. This is my garden. I will glorify Him. I will beautify it, and so on and so forth. So you really want to give it all of your attention, because that's ultimately where you want your quote unquote home to be, not your physical home, but your spiritual home. And if my shul looks nice, the odds are I'm going to go there. If it looks like a dump, the odds are I won't go there that often. Right? That's why when it becomes a garage, well, that's the garage shuls are only used on Shabbos. You know what a garage shul is, right? Yeah, well, it's a part of the garage, but you live too far away from the shul, but you have enough Jews in the area. So what you do is you say, okay, we'll have services in the house and the garage on Yom Tov, Shabbos and Yom Tov. So people say, great, they come to your house, you have a ready-made minyan, and you put a Sefer Torah, this, so on and so forth. But during the rest of the week, or once you can drive, people aren't going to come to your house anymore, right? Because they're not interested. They go somewhere else. So it's only a weekend or not even weekend. You don't even have Sunday morning there. You just have Shabbos. Okay, that's a garage shul. Now it goes on. Right, so Amrav Ashi, Ana Avdi, Lamata Machasya V'lo Charva. I made sure that Masa Machasya would not be destroyed, for I prevented the citizens from building their houses taller than the shul of Ahai Charva. But the Gemara says, wait a second, Masa Machasya was destroyed. You said you didn't destroy it because you made it the shul higher. Yet it was destroyed. So Me'oto Avon Lo Charva. But it wasn't destroyed because of that sin. It's destroyed because of it. No, not that sin. So he said, so let's go on. So then you have to say, well, which sin was it? The Gemara doesn't continue on that. It just says, okay, it's destroyed for some other reason. V'amarava, bar machasya, amarav, chama, bar ogoria, amarav. Tachat, Yishmael, lo tachat nachri. Work under an Ishmaelite, one of the Bnei Yishmael, and do not work under a stranger. Why? He says an Edomite or a Roman, that's your stranger, it is preferable to be a personal servant of an Ishmaelite rather than of an Edomite, because the Edomites are more wicked. We're looking at levels of wickedness. Okay? So the Roman was more wicked than the Ishmaelite, which I think is interesting. If I have to pick my poison, I should at least pick somebody who's more connected with closer morality, if you will. So, mind you, we're nowhere near Muslim. Okay, Muslim is not even in existence when this is being written. At least not the religion we now call Islam. So it's interesting that the Ishmaelites were known for, one thing they were known for was Hachnasid Orchim, welcoming in the stranger, and also protecting the stranger when they were in this house, which is why if you go back to the story of Lot, and the people say, bring out the men that we may know them, and he says, no, they're in the shadow of my house, or they're in the shelter of my house, please do not do anything to them, rather take my daughters. Well, that's a pretty strange response, right? Normally you would protect your daughter, your own family, before you protect the stranger. But apparently, according that was part of that culture where you want to, you had to show the stranger protection more than anything else. So if I'm going to, there's a moral there, there's a moral standard there. So if I'm, sorry?
I forget what it was, but the during World War I, when in Egypt, when Britain was helping Saudi Arabia rebel from the Ottomans, they what's that movie? Lawrence of Arabia, that sort of thing. That sort of thing that happens. But the one of the other Arab countries that was also rebelling from the Ottomans, without the help of England,
Okay.
they were also fighting the Saudi Arabians because they want to control the Arabian Peninsula. So there was a couple factions trying to get control of the peninsula.
Right.
But when one leader would come to the other leader's area and like talk to them, the leader in the area would send like the guard to guard them from the people. Like, don't harm him, he's my guest.
Okay, there you go. So that's what I'm saying. They were known for that. So it could be that that's why the Gemara is picking on the Israelites being a little bit better than the Edomites. Not, mind you, they were saying, you're picking one poison over the other. You don't want to work for either one of them. So, and that's why it says, nachri, rather you should work under a stranger, which I guess, again, we're looking at this to be a Roman, v'lo tachat chavar, and not under a chavar. So what's a chavar? A chavar is the Chabarians were exceptionally destructive and commandeering. Rashi identifies the Chabarians as a people descended from the Persians. Elsewhere he says they reside near the Persians. So Persians were not a good group either, so I'd rather be under the Romans than under the Persians. So there's Chabarians. Maybe they're the ones we ultimately called the barbarians. Right. So I'm not sure. Then it says, Tachat chavar v'lo tachat talmid chacham, and this is a strange one. Rather be under a chavar, not under a Torah scholar. Whoa. Wow. And then finally, and I'll just finish this off, Tachat talmid chacham v'lo tachat yatom v'almana. Rather to be a servant to a talmid chacham and not to be a servant to an orphan or to a widow. So what's going on with those two things? It says one who disturbs a Torah scholar is punished. So it's not that a Torah scholar is a bad guy. It's just that if you're going to come to him and say, okay, what next, boss? Well, you just disturbed him. It's impossible to constantly treat a Torah scholar with all the respect that is halakhically due to him. Therefore, punishment is likely. So it's not a matter of him being a mean boss. It's just that there's such a level of respect that we have to have for him that the odds are we're going to mess up. And if that's the case, even though I'm doing it the same Shemaim, if you will, I'm still going to be punished. And an orphan and widow are easily moved to tears because they are alone in the world. What?
An orphan and a widow.
Right. So the Torah warns that one who distresses an orphan or widow and causes them to cry out will be severely punished at the hand of heaven. So again, if I have to pick my poison, it seems the best person to work for it would be the Ishmaelite. Then it would go to the Roman. Then it would go to the Chabarian. Then it would go to the Talmid Chacham, all for different reasons, obviously. And then it would go to the orphan and the widow. Okay. Then V'yama Rava Bar Machasya. Let me just do a few more here. Amarav Chama Bar Goria Amarav. Kol choli v'lo choli meyam. Any sickness, but not the sickness of the stomach. Kol ke'ev lo ke'ev lev. Any pain, but not the pain of the heart. Kol mechus lo mechus rosh. Any ache, but not ache in the head. And kol ra v'lo isha ra. And any evil, but not an evil woman. And you're looking for that, right? Again, pick your poison. So he says like this. Choli is referring to a lengthy sickness which slowly saps the strength of his victim. So rather that, but not the pain of the stomach. That apparently was much worse. Any pain, but not, which means intermittent pain, such as a toothache or a wound, but not a headache. Not a heartache. And then any ache, that was light or passing pain, but not a headache. And then any woman, but not an evil woman, when choosing a wife, one should pay more attention to her character than to other attributes such as lineage and family. A woman of evil character can give her husband grief his entire life to the point where he despairs of any enjoyment. So, say it again?
Lineage and family the same thing?
No. I can say that you're coming from the Chafetz Chaim, and I could look at your immediate family.
Oh, okay.
So, in other words, you know what I'm saying? So that's what you're looking at. You're looking at the lineage of the family. So it says that when you're looking to get married, you should look to the brother. Right?
Oh, the wife.
Yeah, the wife of the brother. So you should look to the brother and see how the brothers are, because the wife, the one you're dating is going out with, you really date. So the one you're going out with, and you're looking at, and you may be enticed by her looks and she by yours, but nonetheless, that's all you see is lust. So what I have to do is I have to go to the brother, see how the brother is, because the brother is not putting on any pretense. So if the brother, how the rabbi said, if the brother is a cruel guy, then you know she's cruel. If he has a mean temper, the odds are she has a mean temper, and so on and so forth. So you really want to see the brother, which is why before you get engaged, you should probably go to the family for at least a Shabbos. And see how everybody is, and it's very hard to put up a pretense for a whole Shabbos. It's very, very difficult. So most people cannot, and therefore you see the family in their home setting, as compared to in the idyllic world of dating and as you're eating. So it's not the. But again, if you see she's an evil woman, you just don't want her, because she's going to bring you down. It's going to be a hard, very hard life. And last one we'll do is Amarav bar Machasya, Amarav Chama bar Guria, Amarav Im Yukol Yamim Dayo. If all of the seas were black ink, Vagamim Kolmosim, and the marshes were quills, V'Shamayim Yerid, and the heavens were parchments, V'Chol Bnei Adam Lavlarin, and all the people were scribes, Ein Maspikin Lichtov V'Chalala Shel Reshut. They would not suffice to record the depth of the mind of the government. So it says, a king must be mindful of countless matters. Every day there are taxes to be collected, conflicts to be resolved, judgments to be passed in every province of his realm. The Gemara is teaching in a poetic style that one should always pray for the well-being of the government and not suspect it of wrongdoing. The workings of the government are so complex that its intent behind any particular operation cannot immediately be discerned. Therefore, if one sees the government engaged in something that seems improper, he should give it the benefit of the doubt. That's according to the Meiri. The Chidush Yaran writes, the government would like this, by the way, if they would hear me, they'll like this. The Meiri, they'll like. Chidush Yaran writes that the practical lesson of this passage is that one should avoid dealings with the government. That's more like it. As in Pirkei Avot, Sfat Emet suggests that the Gemara means that a king requires this degree of intelligence to run his country successfully, but as a mortal, he cannot possibly have it. Only God, the Supreme King of Kings, is capable of such a task. So, fine. Now the Gemara says, what's the teaching for this? So Amarav Mashashi, Rav Mashashi said, the pasuk says, Shamayim larom ve'eretz la'omek v'leiv v'lachim ein cheker. The heavens for height and the earth for depth, and the mind of kings are beyond investigation. So again, that's because they have so much to deal with. It would be impossible for them to write things down. By the way, this also is another indication that our kings or presidents or whoever gets to the highest levels have no free will, basically, because they're run by God. So whatever you're seeing them do, yes, they certainly have to. They're certainly culpable for not going to excuse anybody for what they do, but at the same time, is because they got such a high level. So Hashem, and we hold that Hashem is running the show. Hashem is giving them what to do. So in this case, when Trump declared Yerushalayim as the eternal capital of Israel, what?
Put the embassy there.
Right. Well, he's recognized, in other words, and he wants to move the embassy. Well, that wasn't Mr. Trump, with all due respect to Mr. Trump. That was God putting into his head to do that. Okay. That's what we would send. And also all the things that Obama did wrong, and Bush and everybody else who didn't do this. It was all from Hashem too. We weren't ready for it. Hopefully now the Mashiach will come and we'll be all set. Okay, we'll stop here.